managing change is the worst thing you can do. It's almost like trying to manipulate things to get an outcome. Whereas enabling change is something which you build like a muscle, and that muscle is something which helps you through multiple different changes. And that's the biggest differentiator between an organization which is constantly being able to adapt and organizations which struggle event by event after event after event.
Welcome to Moments That Inspire, the podcast that uncovers the power moves and hard truths behind leadership today. And I'm your host, Dolon Mitra. Here we explore how to build clarity of self, forge strong connections, and find the courage to create breakthroughs, all absolutely critical to being visible and valued. Through candid stories and hard-earned lessons from remarkable voices, you'll gain insights to shape moments that define your career and help you make the power moves. 2025 has been quite an year. We are no longer toggling between change and business as usual. We are actually leading in perpetual transition. When a lot of research was done on 2025, this year really came about as a year of languish, which is where lots of people said that there was widespread sense of stagnation and a deep sense of lack of fulfillment. So today my guest is perhaps the best person to tackle this topic, Karunesh Prasad, a transition advisor and a change expert who has built an ecosystem devoted to redefining how we live as well as lead change. A serial entrepreneur, and his latest venture, Board Matchup, is poised to revolutionize the board ecosystem. I'm so happy to have you on the show, Karunesh. Welcome.
Thank you, Dharan.
Karunesh, change is something that you've lived on both sides, from the hallways of GE to building your own venture that too thrice, right? So what has really drawn you to this space, and what made you so passionate about building an entire ecosystem around change?
Dharan, first of all, thank you for having me here. Uh, I have always been, I call myself a student of change management and human behavior. When I started to work with companies and started working with my clients, I realized that many of them fail either because they are not ready with the ecosystem or they have not visualized what may come up. They are so buried in their day-to-day transactions. Now, coming back to your question about change management, how it is evolving and where we are going, I think very strongly that it is not an event that we are managing through change. So if somebody asks me that what is change management in your definition, which is a very difficult question, by the way, I find people talking about this more like add-on activity into something that you're doing.
Right.
Where I see this as the main activity that we must do, and this should be part of our work constantly.
I love this, but one particular statement that you made, Karunesh, is not being able to visualize what might come up. What do you think in the present time? How should we really define change? What is change? How should we look at change? And how should we manage change? Maybe a little high level, but as an expert, what do you think we should look at it as?
Yeah. No, thanks for that. And Doran, you have been part of Change It All. You know exactly how we operate and the philosophy behind that. But strong belief is that managing change is the worst thing you can do. It's almost like trying to manipulate things to get an outcome. Whereas enabling change is something which you build like a muscle, and that muscle is something which helps you through multiple different changes. And that's the biggest differentiator between an organization which is constantly being able to adapt and organizations which struggle event by event after event after event. So that's the philosophy number one. I think that's what people should absolutely put it in their head, that it is not going to happen unless you think about it differently. Larger the organization, larger the problem. Meaning, it's very difficult to kind of take so many people along, and therefore, but the first thing organizations must do, and they don't do this very well, is alignment at the top. I know, we always start our initiatives with the 4A model, and the first A of that is align. That align is probably the most important part where people fail. So, for example, in a large organization, when you talked about the data of why people don't achieve their intended goal, it's because the goals itself are very different for different individuals. The intention is that are you making positive impact? Are you moving in the positive direction? Are you making progress? So that's how I would look at the entire, change management and the data that we spoke about.
Right.
Alignment of leadership team will always remain the biggest portion of the change management journey to be successful or to fail.
That was phenomenal. I think the one thing that really is going to stay, and that's something that I have always seen you propagate, is manage change versus enable change. And the moment we look at it from that difference or shift in perspective, lots of things become clear. And that is something I would want all the listeners to really leave with as one of the points coming out from this conversation.
Just one more point I would like to make, Doug. I keep hearing the term that there's a change fatigue in the organization. We are going through a very difficult phase. We can't handle anything more.
Yes.
I think they need to wake up. It's not in your control that how much you want to change. The change is happening outside already. It is dependent on the environment, external forces. You can't control what's happening in the geopolitical world. You can't control what's happening in the technology world. You can't control what's happening with the talent. At that time, if you say that I can't handle too much of change because my people are overwhelmed, good luck. You better wake up and try to do something about building, enabling, and building the capability in the organization for change readiness.
Right.
Instead of saying that I'm going to manage change.
Yes.
So I wanted to leave this thought with you.
Absolutely. I think that really, really resonates. And that's in line with a lot of conversations that we have been having with specific leaders as well. So, again, one particular anecdote which is very common in the change world is when Alan Mulally became the CEO of Ford. It was going through a really bad time. The company was losing billions. However, the beauty is whenever everybody was presenting their KRAs and the KPIs, as you mentioned, everything would look green. So the science, which is the rigor, the data, the business plan, the heat map, everything was in place. However, there was one particular day when Mark Field, the then COO who became the CEO, came and said that, okay, there is this particular launch and it is red. And the room apparently fell silent because red would mean somebody is going to lose a job. That was the culture at that point in time. However, Mulally at that point in time really stood up and applauded and looked around the room and says that, okay, please raise your hand, whoever can help and make this red into green, right? And when I heard that story, the first thing which came to my mind is the thing that you always talk about, which is the art and science of change. We focus a lot on the science, I mean, the KRAs, the KPIs, the data, the dashboard. However, as I am talking to you, within 10 minutes itself, I'm realizing that the art is as important. The alignment, taking people along is as important. So can you just elaborate for our listeners, what exactly is the art and science, and how, for a successful change initiative, do we really balance it?
Yeah. So certainly art is very important, but the difference between the two is that science is easy to be able to see through. It's more quantifiable. So you have a roadmap, you have milestones, you have KPIs, and therefore you are able to figure out whether you have hit it or not hit it, right? So it's easy to be able to see through that. The art part is more difficult because 2 plus 2 is not always 4. You see the reaction of all your actions very differently sometimes. So you can't say that it's happening because of X or Y. And therefore, I always believe in balancing the two. If you are very high on the art, I call it only communications job, right? You are creating the drum beat, you are singing songs about how good we are doing. It's a big hype around that. But the actual work on the science, if it doesn't happen and supporting it, it'll fail. Similarly, on the other side, I have been teaching change management to really smart industrial engineers who know process improvement like back of their hand. They know their data, they know their dashboard, they can calculate everything very well, but they struggle with the art side because they did not have the opportunity of being able to think about the implications on the people. So when I teach them change management, I realize that this balancing act is something which is very important. And this is the reason why you find the HR team so engaged in this activity. It's because they are able to see how capability building in the organization can help. They are able to see the implications of any action on the people. They are able to understand the dynamics of the organization and therefore the implications of every action that we take. And that's why I like organizations where HR is actually playing a very active role in change management capability building. Unfortunate part is that many times I find that people actually start a change activity, they have gone halfway and then say, we are halfway there, we are all set, we need to have somebody manage change now, which is basically saying what? We want somebody to communicate that how great a job we are doing, and therefore everybody should be convinced and be able to adapt to the new one. And that's the problem that you will see all the time.
So, KP, in your vast experience of really helping leaders maneuver or put their change blueprint in place, what have you seen couple of the, common blind spots? It seems extremely commonsensical, but you've seen that happen repeatedly across companies when they are managing change.
I'll give you an example, and because you also come from human resources and I also come from the same, I'll give you the example of employee satisfaction survey. Okay. You will find everywhere, every organization in the world, if you do the data analysis, the top team has the best score. Okay. And
Yeah.
as you go down, the score also keeps going down. You will be able to see the difference from one team to the other team based on the vertical entire organization or team's employee satisfaction survey. And why I'm giving this example is because most of the time the top team thinks that they have communicated, they have told what needs to be done, and therefore everybody should understand. It's a one-way communication. Whereas the biggest differentiator is not in being able to tell people what we are doing, but to be able to involve them in the process. It only sinks in when people are actually dirtying their hand. You tell people to do something, the first thing is pushback. But if you bring them, allow them to be part of the journey, even if the contribution is very small, they are able to participate. And in the process, they are able to understand the rationale behind everything that we are doing. And I think this has been the biggest differentiator, involving people versus not involving people. So co-creation is the word I use. It's a very simple thing, but very powerful. Most of the time, people tend to push it on people and hope that it will work.
Right, absolutely. So, again, as an expert, can you give a couple of quick tips on co-creation? So, is there any couple of ways in which HR or leaders can really look at co-creation and try to, manage that particular noise bite as much as possible?
Yeah, no, there's certainly, first thing I must give a disclaimer, there's no one size fits all solution here. Each
Absolutely.
organization is different. So therefore, all the tips that I may suggest here may apply to one versus the other, and not all of them may apply to everybody's situation. But by and large, co-creation is an act of not only telling, not only listening, but something in between. It's a two-way interaction. I'll give you an example from my, early days at GE. And there was something that I felt was very smart of our CHRO at that time to do. So she came to one of the leadership session that we were having, and GE used to run leadership sessions like every month, something happening in Cottonville, which is the training center. And one of the top such thing was called MDC. She would come into every MDC, and we were trying to roll out the new company values, and she was working through that. It was ready. In their eyes, it was ready, but she never said that we are ready to roll out. What she did was, in a series of multiple such sessions with the class over a period of 3 months or so, she got it into the room, made it part of the agenda, allowed people to critique, talk about it, have a conversation, redefine, dissect everything for half a day. Now, by the time the 3 months was over, she told us that she had covered more than 10,000 people through that conversation. Now, 10,000 for such a large company is nothing big, but she had got the participation in the process from very big part of the organization already, cross-functional. And then, of course, the HR community, she ran additional things before rolling out. What I'm saying is, instead of people saying that, oh, something has been imposed on us, a lot of people were excited that, you know what, I worked on this set of values and I personally actually changed this word, or I worked on this word. The definition has my contribution also. So imagine that 20,000 people in the organization, HR community, and many business folks are excited about something even before it is launched. The point I'm
Right.
making is co-creation is a very simple thing if we think about it and very intentionally do it. And
Right.
if we do it intentionally, we tend to allow people to participate, critique, and be able to contribute with both the positives and the implications, so that the organization is able to think through whether this will work or not, and what are the areas that we should be cautious of.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to one particular area which is really talked after at this point in time, which is AI, And we know that 75% of knowledge workers are already using AI in some form or the other. And people are expecting in their minds that because of AI, their work will change. And as well as leaders can use AI or whatever is available to them in terms of enhancing this particular process of change. So, as an expert, what would your recommendation be? Where must human leaders really hold the line of how change is happening? What are the things that they need to control? Whereas, what are the pockets where they can really, really look at leveraging AI and crank up this particular change, but process which does not look as audacious as it often does in the present times?
Yeah. And as you know, Dolan, we are also helping many organizations now going through the same change management, but also trying to visualize the whole AI adoption thing.
Right.
Larger the organization, bigger the worry about using new tools and trying to kind of ring fence everything so that data does not go out and so on and so forth, right? But let's talk about change management and AI first. I think that the process of managing change or enabling change is going to become very different simply because of the speed and the ease of being able to do some of these things. So, what we were taking 3, 4, 5 days to do will take probably just few hours. That's the biggest difference from what we have seen earlier versus what we are going to see now. The panic is leading towards people actually getting rid of people, not visualizing what will happen, and therefore how to get people ready, how to reallocate resources, how to reallocate assignments, tasks, and so on. Talking about change management, very clearly for me, this is the part of process improvement in a 100 times speed. Okay. So
Right.
stakeholder analysis and many of the dashboarding tools, data, churning out of the data, we'll be able to do much faster. And leadership is not about data only. That's a very small part. Leadership is about emotions and leading people in the direction that you want to take them along with you. So in change management, I think we are going to see a very big shift, but a very positive one. Focus on people's ability to be able to take people along will become even bigger, because all the transactional work can easily be done by AI in that case.
Moving a little ahead and changing the direction a little bit, let's talk about your latest business initiative, which is Board Matchup, and which is something which is really catering to a lot of senior people, or that's raising a lot of curiosity of senior people in the industry at this point in time. So, as I understand from staying within the part of the evolution, Board Matchup is stepping right into that gap. New pipeline, new profiles, new rituals to raise the readiness. So, given this background, how are you seeing individuals, industries, as well as organizations that make you optimistic that the board ecosystem is really changing and changing for the better?
Yeah. So Again, the board thing is, as you know, very close to my heart. I've been working with a lot of different organizations, entities, bodies to be able to support that. And I'm continuously learning myself also. What I'm watching, and one of the big trigger for me to get into this space was watching a very talented senior executive transition out of a full-time role to do something on his own and how this person struggled. Okay. And this is around 4 or 5 years back now. But as I watched the transition, I was just thinking that this is wrong. I know many people who are sitting in board positions, advisory roles, many other things. This person is much more talented and capable than many others, but did not land very well. It took a very long time, although now this person is doing very well and very well settled. Done. But at that time, when I saw the struggle, I said, I must do something about it. And why I'm talking about this is the need. The need part is because we see so many senior executives who are physically quite capable of working till late. Our health and all that is very different than what it used to be. There's no retirement anymore. People continue to work. I call it the next chapter of their career. And the next chapter for many executives is coming much earlier than the retirement age. Talking about board. So of course, board was always meant for compliance. It was always led by the governance part of the work that people do. But more and more we have seen, and all the past controversies or downfall that we have seen is happened because of some compliance risk or non-disclosure in some way or the other. And therefore, always risk and finance and controllership remains as the biggest part of the board governance. Where people have failed is exactly the same thing that we spoke about all this while: strategy, change, people, and therefore, what are we going to do? How are we going to build the culture? I'm part of the NRC committee at Singapore Institute of Directors, and we talk about this very often, that how NRC can actually impact the entire organization. Why? Because they are looking at succession, they are looking at talent, they're also looking at remuneration. And in the process, they are building culture and behaviors. What are you rewarding and not rewarding also builds your culture in the organization, right? So think about it, that on one hand, we have large companies who are focusing on long-term strategy and governance, but the culture part is very big. On the other side, we are also looking at many emerging organizations who are looking to grow. And as they are growing, they want the right governance model in place. So, the way we have created this whole ecosystem that we are talking about now, I'm trying to build something which is useful for the people who want to continue work longer. These are the same people who are in what I call the flex executive economies career. Could be a member here, they could be an advisor somewhere here. They could also be a fractional leader of some kind, could be working on interim, multiple. So, same person could be working in 3 or 4 different models with different people. Now, coming to the organization now, there will always be big companies who will have full-time executives, which is fine. But larger chunk of the new demand for talent is going to come from mid-size startups and growing companies. They may not be able to afford the same senior executive as they would like to, and therefore fractional and interim model, advisory model is something that I see as a huge opportunity. So my ecosystem building plan is very clearly focused on matching both sides in a way that both are able to gain from the capability which exists. And I see this as the future of talent management. This is how people are going to work in future. So organizations who are not ready, I'm also working towards educating the organizations, getting the ecosystem correctly so that they are able to do this well. And very exciting times, very exciting work. And you have been part of that, Daron. You have been helping create some of the programs that we have worked through. It's because we want to make sure that we are not leaving people behind.
Right. Absolutely. That was very beautifully said, KP. And also, I think a very important part is the balance, the need, as well as ensuring that people are ready to really be able to work on those needs. So, also, as you rightly mentioned, there is no concept of retirement anymore. And the need to create an impact for every individual has gone up substantially over the last few years. So, one thing I think both of us have seen, the entire team has seen actually, is that the desire to be a part of the board ecosystem or operate as an advisor has gone up like how? I mean, previously it used to be around 55 or 60. Now 40 plus people are aspiring to be a part of this kind of an ecosystem. Now, everybody is struggling to see how they are really setting themselves up for this particular board and advisory role. And the usual comes up that make a list of things that you can contribute in, improve your visibility, the typical. But there is definitely something which is way beyond, and you have been seeing people on their journeys very, very closely. So, as per you, do board roles come with just seniority, or is there any specific strategic preparation required?
I'll answer this very differently, Dharan. And let me go back to one of my experience. I was sitting in a talent review with a very senior leader, and we were trying to promote a very high potential talent into almost the top role into one of the divisions. This was not a role change, it was a level band change from what we call executives to an officer kind of a level in a large company. And she asked a question saying that this person is great. Yeah, you have talked about it enough. I can see a lot of achievements. I have a question that has this person ever done an individual contributor role? So we were like, we're talking about such a senior role. Why are we even mentioning an individual contributor role? No, I mean, the person had 500 people, 1,000 people, right now leading 20,000 people organization, and you're talking about individual contributor role. She said, no, I would like the person to do an individual contributor role before the person can become an officer in the company. The boss says so. Anyway, the things happened and follow up. Ultimately, the person took a role as a integration leader for a large acquisition that we had done. Integration leaders normally don't have a very big team. It's a very small team, but you're managing a very large integration. It was all about influence. It was all about asking the right questions. It was all about making things happen despite of not having control on the whole situation. It's not that you roll up your arms and, get things done. Indeed, she was absolutely spot on. The person actually failed and failed miserably. Now I'm bringing it back to the board discussion. Most of the executives, when they're in full-time role, the best thing to do is they are the problem solvers. They make things happen. They are the best people to execute things. The transition is not that of doing a international board directors program or something like that. The transition is from doing to making things happen without directly getting involved. From telling to asking the right question. And asking the right question, in my mind, is the biggest shift that people will see from moving to a board role compared to what they have done before. And I can see people struggling. They take pride in saying that, oh, I'm a very engaged and involved board member, and therefore I want to get hands on. No, you're not required to. It's the executive team sitting there for doing that. You need to ask the right questions. Half the time, the failures happen because the board members are not able to ask the right question. In many cases, all the courses that people go through can only tell you about the risk, compliance, governance model, but it's your experience which is going to be able to make you ask and visualize the right question, because you have seen a lot, you have done a lot, you have worked in a model that you're able to see through things. So we should not. Back to your point, people trying to do something different early is most welcome because they are having the experience, but they are also new age technology, sustainability, ESG, cybersecurity experts, and therefore they are able to contribute. But we should not forget the fact that because there's no one size fits all, a lot of the experience of the board member actually helps here to be able to ask the right question. Independent directors as experts in multiple different areas are the ways to kind of create the right kind of combination and mix in the board, because the talent mix that we have should be able to complement each other, and you are able to therefore see everything together. Now, talking about the journey, I encourage people to do more advisory work whether you're working for not-for-profit or with startups or with early stage companies, it's absolutely fine to do that because that's what makes you more experienced. And the final line I would say is if you're trying to be on the board for money, don't do that because this will not give you money. This can only give you the satisfaction of contributing the right way. But if you're doing it in a way that you are able to also run a flex executive career, then board role, advisory role combination can take you very far.
I mean, I love that this is almost turning into a masterclass, KP, in terms of even for me as well as everybody else. I mean, the preparation is very, very important in whatever you want to do in life in future. So I would like to stay on that a little bit more. You mentioned a couple of things like moving from telling to asking the right questions and being able to influence. I mean, these two to me stood out as a couple of things that definitely people need to strengthen their muscles on. Also, I mean, board is now, but you have always been working in the area of flex executive through Bridgetall, etc. And you mentioned something very, very important which stayed with me is that are you prepared to enter or to leave your structured corporate life to a flex ecosystem? Because I've personally seen that a mailbox really guides your day. Whereas once you enter the fractional, maybe there's no mailbox which is guiding your day or streamlining your day. So, if I may ask you, if a person is moving from a structured corporate career to fractional, may not be just board, maybe perhaps a little junior also, more than the positives, what are absolutely the red flags that he or she should be prepared for or prepare the kitty for before entering the flex executive ecosystem?
Yeah, no, this is a very important question, Doran, and I think I'll use few words, okay? And we'll go into the detail of that. I think these are the words which to me is paramount in this transition, okay? Number one is ego, okay? I have seen people actually failing miserably the moment they come out of a full-time executive role, not because of anything else, but only one reason, that's the ego. They feel uncomfortable reaching out because of the ego. They get offended if they don't get help from people they might have helped in the past. They feel very uncomfortable not being in command. So ego is one thing that people should certainly think about, that how do they make that shift? Second is taking it for granted. Taking it for granted that because I was so and so and so, because your CV says that you were so and so, you should be on the table everywhere. Yeah. So that's the other part, that you should not take things for granted. You could do that because you are on a seat. Now you need to talk about not as CEO, CXO of so and so company, but you need to build your own CV in a way that you are able to get known as the expert of a topic, all things you're bringing to the table, and start talking about that. So, not taking things for granted that simply because you're shifting from a big role, things will happen. And third part is personal branding. Most of the people in large organizations are very inward focused. They are busy kind of navigating internally, trying to network with people internally, which is good. I mean, it is your strength, but that's not the only thing. If you don't network externally, then so personal branding helps you do that. And people who do that intentionally, who are visible and people are knowing them in the industry, in whatever field they are in, it's very helpful. And finally, I would say the transition is about how are you actually able to contribute for the community, the profession, the ecosystem that you operate in, so that people come to you seeking that help. So my suggestion to people will be these 3 or 4 words: personal branding, ego, not taking things for granted, and then certainly contributing to the cause, whichever cause you pick it up.
Thank you so much for that. And that's going to stay. We are coming to almost the end of the conversation, and I want to look at the other side of the table. This was all about individuals, people preparing themselves, ecosystem, etc., etc. And as you really said, real transformation needs an ecosystem approach rather than a hero approach. So if I look at it from an organization perspective, as they're saying, by 2030, 50% of workforce will be fractional. So how do organizations reframe themselves or change their processes or create an inclusive culture to ensure that they are really successful or they are getting the population when people want to go the fractional way? What are the changes they need to do?
I think the first thing people should think about is that how are they going to get out of the organization structure and hierarchy to be used external talent well. Okay. When I look at film industry, one of the biggest thing that I learned from them is how they are able to do everything, getting so many different individual stars together to work on something which can create a fantastic movie, right? Imagine how many different experts are coming together. They're all stars in their own rights, and still you are able to get a fantastic outcome. I give a lot of credit to the people who are actually orchestrating the whole thing, right? Why can't we do that in the organization? We teach so much of philosophy around leadership, communication, collaboration. The movie industry guys don't go through that training, and still they are doing it much better job than what we are doing. So let's think about that. So we need to build that ecosystem by busting the org design as the only way of being able to get things done. Number two is, this whole thing about this level, and therefore, because I'm a director, therefore I should have this, and because I'm a manager, I should not have that. And external person is a contractor who should be the lowest. No, it doesn't work like that. External people you may be hiring who might be much more knowledgeable than your functional head. You better get ready to be able to use them properly by allowing them access to information, access to data, onboarding them well so that they are able to contribute, get them into the conversation. I have seen some fantastic advisors not able to provide inputs because the organization thought that, oh, this is very internal for us to bring in front of that person. We'll ask the right questions and get the inputs instead of putting everything in front of that person. We need to change that mindset. It's not about how HR is looking at the titles and everything also. It's much beyond that, because you're talking about opening your books in front of an external person to be able to contribute properly and help you go through the journey well. And that requires a very different mindset. And I'll go back another area that I've seen. Oil and gas industry who are working on projects, IT companies, when they are working on projects, they sometimes bring in very good experts, deep expertise to be able to create something together and do it very well. Why? Because they are not confined by the titles and designation and the org design only. They are working on that project. We need to think about that. Running a factory can be absolutely fine, but there are many areas where you will be running the organization very differently by bringing in different experts. Allow them to play. Don't stop them from playing. The more you get them to play, higher the quality of the game in your organization also. So I would say that the organizations need to work on those two or three areas, not only getting confined with their policies and processes, revisit them, go back to zero-based, approach, saying that if I were to do the recreation of this, what all do I need? If I don't have that, how can I bring that in? Is my policy stopping me? Is it a country law which is stopping me, or is my traditional practice? Unless it's a law which is stopping you, you can bust everything else. So the only thing which should be stopping you from doing something and reshaping it should be the law of the land. Everything else is your internal. And revisit that. This is the time to revisit that.
That was beautifully said, KP. Thank you so much for that, KP. Before we end, if you could just take our listeners through what has been perhaps the toughest change that you have had to go through personally, anything from anywhere, and how has that really prepared and inspired your thoughts about transition and change?
In my own career, the biggest shift was moving out of HR, working in other functions, and watching it very closely to be able to appreciate how things work in an operational area. And what I learned was that everything is possible. So the science and art conviction that I talk about from change management point of view comes from the fact that the more I worked outside of HR, I was able to get convinced that there are areas that I need a logical sequencing of activities to be able to get the outcome. So if I'm in a factory and if I put the process and the layout and everything very logically in the right manner, we'll get the outcome that we need. But unfortunately, that is not going to happen because five people with five different minds coming together and trying to do something, the outcome may be entirely different. And that is the biggest thing that I saw, which has become my conviction. Now, coming back to your question, that what is that biggest or most challenging thing I saw? I think the degree has differed. Early stage, it was more of learning myself and understanding everything else. But in organizations, if I talk about the impact in the organization and how I've seen organizations fail, without naming the company, without naming the people involved, I would say that I've seen things fail when individuals become larger than the organization. Time and again, I've seen that organizations don't fail because of any other reason, not because of AI, not because of technology, not because of geopolitical problems. It becomes, and therefore, I would say that I continue to work on leadership alignment as the prime focus, because if we get that right, half the battle is won. Everything else is execution, and execution will be much better. So, talking about the biggest challenges, I've seen things failing because of individual egos. Sometimes it's the CEO, sometimes it's the number two, it's sometimes a combination of three or four top leaders in that organization who are driving in different direction.
To our listeners, as you realized, most change efforts stall because we try to move plans without moving people. And today we have named the fixes to a great extent. Make the truth safe. Run the real rhythm, not your rhythm, the real rhythm. And keep humans, the right sets of human or all sets of humans in the loop. So from the hallways to the boardroom, we heard why the art and science needs to meet to make change successful. To our listeners, your move this week. Pick up one ritual or one dashboard or one story to turn motion into momentum. Saying that, stay tuned for more thought-provoking episodes on moments that inspire. And thank you so much, Karunesh. That was indeed a very, very practical and directional conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks for having me here.